On this auspicious afternoon, with the benediction of Lord Sri Ram, the adorable deity of Fulton, and our royal patrons, Honorable Srimanta Ramraje Naik Nimbalkar, President Fulton Education Society, Chairman Maharashtra State Legislative Council, Honorable Srimanta Raghunath Raje Naik Nimbalkar, Chairman Fulton Education Society, Honorable Srimanta Sanjeev Raje Naik Nimbalkar, Secretary Fulton Education Society, and all the respected members of Governing Council Fulton Education Society, Fulton. On behalf of Fulton Education Societies, Mudoji College, Fulton, Department of English, a warm and cordial all the galaxy of the intellectuals. Today's resource persons, Dr. Debashri Prasad Nath, Professor, Department of Cultural Studies, Tejpur University, Assam. Pramod K. Nair, Department of English, University of Hyderabad. All the dignitaries of Shivaji University, Kolhapur. Respected Dr. S.B. Bhambar, Sir, Chairman, Board of Studies in English and Linguistics, Shivaji University, Kolhapur. Respected Dr. Tripti Karekatti, Ma'am, Professor and former heads, Department of English, Shivaji University, Kolhapur. Respected Dr. C.A. Langre, Sir, Dr. A.M. Saravde, Sir. Respected faculty of the Department of English, Shivaji University, Kolhapur. Dr. M.S. Waswani, Sir. Dr. R.G. Barvekar, Ma'am. Dr. Prabhanjan Mane, Dr. Bhadle, Sir. Today's special invitees, former Principal Dr. M.A. Sheikh, DG College, Satara. Dr. Ashok Thorat, Founder, Director, Institute of Advanced Studies in English, Pune. Former Principal, Dr. N.V. Nalavde, New College, Kolhapur. Principal Dr. J. M. Maitre, Sir, Mohan Rao Patangrao Mahavidyalay, Borgaon. Dr. R.S. Jirange, Professor and Head, PG Department of English, Yashwantrao Moite College, Eranvale, Pune. Professor P.V. Satsute, formerly Head, Arts and Commerce College, Satara. The chief guest of this August gathering, Dr. P.H. Kadam, Principal, Mudoji College, Fulton. ELTA Office Bearers, Dr. S.R. Sawant, Sir, President of ELTA, Professor and Head, Department of English, Mahavidyalay Y. Dr. D.S. Kale, Convener, ELTA Satara Chapter, Associate Professor and Head, Department of English, Amdar Shashikant Shinde, Mahavidyalay Meda. Treasurer, Dr. Ujwala Kathe, Ma'am, Mahila Mahavidyalay, Karad. Secretary, ELTA, Dr. Arvind Zadav, YC College of Science, Karad. All the office bearers of ELTA and all the members of ELTA Satara Chapter. All the respected members of College Development Committee, Mudoji College, Fulton. IQSC Coordinator, Dr. S.G. Dikshit, Sir. The IQSC committee members and all the criteria chairmen. All the heads of the departments of Mudoji College, Fulton. All the faculty members, non-teaching staff, and the delegate participants from the colleges and universities of Maharashtra and other states of India. For the one-day national webinar jointly organized by Department of English, Mudoji College, Fulton, and English Language Teachers Association of India, Satara Chapter, on the main theme, Cultural Studies, a New Approach to Explore Cultures, Cultural Texts, and Artifacts. I once again extend a big heartedly and warm welcome to one and all. As it is a virtual gathering, it is our humble effort to welcome you all with a welcome song presented by our alumni student Shubhangi Shinde Bobde. Shubhangi Shinde Bobde, a very active student, a past student of ours. Presently, she is working as a primary teacher. She is very active and still in connection with us. And moreover, she is connected with us because she is also the daughter of our former head, Dr. A.Y. Shinde sir. Now she is going to present a welcome song.
अंतर आंगन पावन
Thank you, Shubhangi, for your lovely welcome song. And before we go for the inaugural speech, may I take the opportunity to request you all to have a look at a video clip as an introduction to our college and the department.
कुछ पाने की हो आस आस कोई अरमा हो जो खास खास आशाएं हर कोशिश में हो बार बार कर दरियाओं को आर पार आशाएं मंजिलों को छीन ले आशाएं अब मुश्किल नहीं कुछ भी नहीं कुछ भी आशाएं अब मुश्किल नहीं कुछ भी नहीं कुछ भी अपने संग तुझको वहाँ जन्नत से मुलाकात हो पूरी हो तेरी हर दुआ आशाएं उम्मीदें हंसे अब मुश्किल नहीं कुछ भी नहीं कुछ भी आशाएं उम्मीदें हंसे अब मुश्किल नहीं कुछ भी नहीं कुछ गुजरे ऐसी हर रात रात ख्वाहिशों से बात बात आशाएं लेकर सूरज से आग आग गाए जा अपना राग राग आशाएं कुछ ऐसा करके दिखा खुद खुश हो जाए खुदा आशाएं अब मुश्किल नहीं कुछ भी नहीं कुछ भी कुछ पाने की हो आस पास, कोई अरमा हो जो खास खास आशाएं, हर कोशिश में हो बार बार दरियाओं को आर पार आशाएं, तूफानों को छीन के मंजिलों को छीन ले आशाएं।
Now I request our principal, the chief guest of this national webinar, for the inaugural speech.
Namaste. Good afternoon, all. On behalf of the Mudoji College, Fulton, I welcome all the dignitaries and participants. Today, the Department of English has organized a webinar in association with the English Language Teachers Association of India on the topic of cultural studies. Fulton Education Society's Mudoji College, Fulton, a multi-faculty college of Maharashtra. The college was established in 1957 by Srimanta Malojiraje Naik Nimbalkar, the king of Fulton Sansthan. The college was established with a noble cause to provide higher education to those sections of the society who had remained out of mainstream for many generations. To realize the vision of founder of the institution, the college caters to the diverse socio-economic background and objective to enhance the overall development of the student. The college offers undergraduate and postgraduate courses. It is imparting education in the Faculty of Arts, Commerce, and Science. Taking into consideration the era of globalization, the college also runs professional courses such as BCS, BBA, and BCA. Apart from the syllabus-based learning, the college also provides ample opportunities to the students for participation in various co-curricular and extracurricular activities. Sports activities, NSS, NCC, and cultural events are the of the college. The college has a well-equipped library with more than 1 lakh books. The college organizes a number of academic activities for the overall development of students in particular and society in general. And we have a royal and great patrons, Honorable Srimanta Ramraje Naik Nimbalkar, Chairman, Legislative Council, Mumbai, Srimanta Raghunath Raje Naik Nimbalkar, Chairman of the Governing Council, Fulton Education Society, Fulton, and Srimanta Sanjeev Raje Naik Nimbalkar, Secretary of Fulton Education Society, who gives us a full autonomy to enhance quality education and always appreciate to organize such activities. Today, Department of English, which is one of the leading department in our college, organize such a national level webinar. I hope that this webinar would be fruitful for all participants. Basically, culture is what differentiates one group or society from the next. Different societies have different cultures. However, it is important not to confuse the ideas of culture with society. A culture represents the beliefs and practices of a group, while society represents the people who share those beliefs and practices. I'm not an expert on this topic. Today we have eminent resource persons. They can express their scientific views on the topic cultural studies. Definitely we can enjoy this research-oriented discussion. Eventually, I express my best wishes for grand success of the webinar. Thank you. Over to organizing committee.
Now I request Dr. S.A. Mane, Mrs. S.A. Mane, Head Department of English, for the introduction of our department.
Good afternoon to all. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome the eminent scholars, respected Dr. Debarshi Prasad Nath, Professor, Department of Cultural Studies, Tezpur University, Assam, Dr. Pramod K. Nair, Professor, Department of English, University of Hyderabad, the authorities and the dignitaries of Shivaji University, Kolhapur, today's chief guest, Principal Dr. P.H. Kadam, ELTA office bearers, the delegate participants, and all the faculty members of our college for today's one-day national webinar, jointly organized by Department of English, Mudhoji College, Fulton, and English Association of India, ELTA Satara chapter, on the main theme of cultural studies, a new approach to explore the cultures, cultural text, and artifacts. I'm here to say a few words about the Department of English, Mudhoji College, Fulton. The Department of English is one of the largest departments in the college. It was established in 1972 with the main thrust on catering to the needs and demands of the students coming from a rural area and their interest in learning English language and literature. The department runs UG and PG courses. The Department of English has a great tradition of committed team of qualified, experienced, and proficient teachers in the field of language and literature. They have made notable contribution in curriculum design, academic excellence, and research activities. They have been working in different key positions, both at college and university level. They are invited as resource persons in national and state level seminars, conferences, and also as guest speakers to other institutions for academic courses. The department took initiative to conduct UGC courses and COC courses offered by Shivaji University, Kolhapur, a course in spoken English and soft skill development, bridge course, remedial coaching, and crash courses are conducted rigorously every year for the benefit of students. The department has conducted national seminars and workshops on revised syllabus in the past. Apart from regular teaching, our department conducts several academic activities through English Literary Association, which provides a forum to the students for extracurricular, co-curricular, and cultural activities. It is the policy of the department that all the academic activities conducted should be geared to develop the overall personality of the students so as to equip them with modern and sensible outlook to face the challenges of the competitive global scenario. The department also organizes workshops and guest lectures under lead college schemes for the students of the department. The faculty of the department takes efforts to motivate the students to write research articles. Many of the research articles written by the students have been published in college magazine Uday. These articles have won the prizes in the college magazine competition conducted by Shivaji University, Kolhapur. The students are also guided to present the research papers in Avishkar and university level research activity. Besides, they are inspired to participate in the various competitions such as quiz, debate, and elocution organized by our college and other colleges also. The students of the department have consistently made their mark in academic also. We feel proud to mention that almost every year, the students of our department receive Rajarshi Shahu Merit Scholarship and Shivaji University Merit Scholarship. Taking into consideration that teaching, learning, and evaluation is of prime importance, the department conducts student-centric activities. Along with the regular classroom teaching, we use the other methods such as group discussion, role play, quiz competition, seminars, and problem-solving methods to bring constructive approach in teaching. The department has a good collection of books on language, literature, and critical theories. It has also a fair number of CDs and DVDs related to literature that can be shown to the students from time to time. The college has also set up a language lab to improve the basic language skills of the students. The department has notable alumni who are working in the different capacities. Lastly, I would like to say that organization of the events like today's webinar becomes successful with the blessings, cooperation, and guidance of our patrons, university authorities, institutional authorities, and the faculty members of the college. All of us know that the events that were organized in person are now switched to a virtual mode due to the pandemic and still be successful. So I'm very much thankful to you all to be amongst us virtually to grace the function. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. This national webinar is jointly organized by Department of English, Mudoji College, Fulton, and English Language Teachers Association of India. So I request Dr. D.S. Kale sir, Head Department of English, Amdar Shashikant Shinde Mahavidyalay, Convener of English Language Teachers Association of India, Satara chapter, for a brief introduction of ELTA Satara chapter. Kale sir.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm really very thankful to you for introducing me so nicely. I'm really happy and I take pleasure to welcome all the dignitaries and participants on this auspicious occasion of national webinar organized by Mudoji College, Fulton in collaboration with ELTA Satara chapter. And the theme of the seminar is Cultural Studies, a new approach to explore cultural texts and artifacts. In fact, I take double pleasure because I have been an alumni of Mudoji College, Fulton, and that's the precise reason for my being proud of this event. And I'm really happy to be here. Yeah, to briefly talk about ELTA and Satara chapter of ELTA. I would like to tell you all that English Language Teachers Association of India was founded by late Professor Padmasri Natarajan in 1969. In fact, the idea of establishing ELTA was to bring together the teaching faculties of India, all the teaching faculties of English across India together on a single platform to encourage them to write and publish. That was the idea at the beginning, but later on, slowly it went on grooming and blooming, and now it has an international organization in a sense, and has been grossly involved with academic and research activities. It supports, today I'm really happy that almost 59 chapters of ELTA are active across India, and ours is the 56th chapter, which was established in October 2020. In fact, we have a story how we established this chapter. We started this chapter. One fine morning, Professor Dixit happened to message me, and he inquired about how about starting Satara chapter of ELTA. And the idea, it was already there in my mind, but it was not taking any initiating. And suddenly I agreed that, okay, let's try and initiate, and let's try to connect all the people, all the teachers of English from Satara district. And I created a group, Club English Satara. And because of pandemic situations, most of the teachers who are working from home, we happened to share some questions and questionnaires, and it helped us a lot to encourage our students to take up with exams and take exam. And finally, we put up this idea to start a chapter, and yes, we did it. We inaugurated Satara chapter of ELTA on 5th October 2020, and then onward, we have been participating and organizing different activities. I would like to tell you all that in the month of June, President Dr. Sunil Sawant, he organized the first event of our chapter, and it was recent trends in research in language and literature. It was organized on 28th of June. And from then onwards, we all have started planning our activities, and I'm really happy that I was able to successfully conduct a 2-day online conference because of the support and participation of all the members of ELTA here. And it has certainly given us energy and enthusiasm because we all, the 55 members of Satara chapter, come together and conduct all the activities. Now, today we all are here to witness the success of this national webinar. I'm really thankful, and I welcome all the dignitaries and participants on behalf of Satara chapter. Thank you. Thank you so much. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir, for your brief introduction of ELTA. In fact, I would like to say the credit of formation of Satara chapter goes to Dr. Kyle. His initiation and efforts have made it possible. Thank you once again, sir. Thank you. Now, I take the privilege of inviting our former head, Dr. A.Y. Shinde, sir, to deliver the concept note of webinar.
Respected Dr. Debarshi Prasad Nath, Dr. Pramod Nair, then authorities from our college, Principal Dr. Kadam, then my former teachers, the principals of the various colleges.
खाणारा उठला नाही तर मी कसं उठणार मग.
I have been allotted the responsibility of explaining the concept of this seminar. It's a delicate work. I am supposed to clear the concept, but I am also not supposed to encroach on the other areas, and the time also doesn't permit me to do so. So first point I want to make it clear here how cultural studies approach is different from only the study of culture. Culture was studied under anthropology, sociology, and other subjects. But in those subjects, that approach was treated as traditional. So previously, culture was looked at as meaning-making system or networks of meaning or a way of life. So traditional study of culture dealt with culture without bothering much with the relation with power. Here, only the data of culture was collected, but in cultural studies, data of cultural practices is not all. In cultural studies, only the study of culture without caring for power. Power relations is not its a goal. In cultural studies, culture was studied previously. So before cultural studies approach, culture meant culture of the high class, that is elite culture. High culture, cultural studies looked at culture as an high cultural studies looked at culture only the culture of the high class. So the definition of culture under cultural studies had to be changed, and now it includes all the groups of the people, all the communities and their culture. And the rise of cultural studies changes the definition of culture, the concept of culture, and it is a new perspective on the concept of culture. Concept of culture has been extended and made all inclusive. So it is culture of high class as well as the culture of the low class people. Then cultural studies relates culture with power and ideology. Culture is always linked with power. All cultural practices are essentially practices of power, and cultural differences, identities in terms of race, ethnicity, class, gender, sexuality, caste, nation, etc. They give a group of people in society power. And so the objective of cultural studies is to understand culture in all its complex forms and analyze the social and political context in which culture manifests itself. So cultural study is a side of both study, analysis, and political criticism. So power or ideology is at the root of culture. No culture is innocent. So all cultural practices are essentially practices of power. Power operates invisibly. And so any serious study of culture must take into account the politics of identities, how they are produced, preserved, and propagated. So power is embedded there. So culture sometimes termed as ideological study. So ideology is very important. And so the equivalent term for cultural studies once upon a time was ideological study. So power is the result of ideology. Now, it has to be changed. This unequal relationship, it gives rise to the power ideology gives rise to culture types. So in culture, we find dominant culture, subordinate culture, popular culture, subcultures, counter cultures, residual cultures, emergent cultures. And so the some cultures try to dominate other cultures. And so the subordinate cultures try to subvert, resist. And so how this is done, that is the subject matter of cultural studies. Then cultural studies is an interdisciplinary subject. Cultural studies is dependent upon other subjects. So it demonstrates that life cannot only be determined by traditional benchmarks such as economics or politics or other by, but one has to take multi culture approach. So multi approach. So problem is there, and so in order to solve the problem, one subject, one theory is not sufficient, and so insights, ideas taken from different subjects, they are applied in cultural studies approach, and that is why it is called a multi approach instead of a single approach, and so it becomes effective according to the critics. So to solve problem of unequal relations, instead of one single approach, multiple perspective approach is better. So it is assumed in the culture. So key concepts from various subjects are taken here and they are used here from cultural studies perspective. There are scholars different make groups of theories. So theories are related to locations or spaces. There are also theories related to people. There are theories related to gender, media, etc. So there are various critics or theories. Some of them are pioneers, some of them are they are called founding fathers, and there are also some contemporary critics who have developed this field. So this is how cultural studies is developing. Now, what is the significance of this subject? What is the significance of this discipline? So, very first thing is that this every theory tries to help people to solve problem. So, problem of power. And so, when there is the unequal relationship, or when some of the objects like culture, they are looked at with some bias. So it is the subject matter of study or theory to remove such biases. So cultural studies can help remove prejudices, biases about cultures, especially the cultures of minorities, subalterns, tribals, Adivasis, nomadic tribes, hill tribes, forest tribes, frontier tribes, Dalit, nomad, tribals, uprooted, immigrants, migrants, refugees, women, disabled, that is disadvantaged people or oppressed people or underprivileged people. Now, so this approach can help empower the minorities. Now, this particular subject is very important as far as our Indian situation is concerned. Because of multiculturalism, multilingualism, or multicultural scenario, this becomes very important. And this approach is called comparative or multiple perspective approach. And so it is important. And in the global scenario, this is also very important because here in our age is marked by intolerance to difference arising out of language, out of gender, out of other categories, that is class, etc. And to solve this problem, the subject can help us to make tolerance towards differences, and also to make people help people to live together, that is coexistence, and this is how it can help the people to maintain unity in diversity. And so this subject can provide tools to interpret the cultural objects or culture properly. Now there are some problems when we study this, because even though this is a new theory, it is welcomed by many people, but there is one principle: no theory is foolproof. Every theory leaks. That is, there are some problems. Now, this is called Eurocentric model. So, how it works in Indian context, that is also a problem, and such problems can be discussed in such webinars or in such kind of the events. Then another thing, being this being an interdisciplinary subject, how is it new, or is it new? Because terminologies are taken inside, key ideas are taken from other fields, but is it new? That is the problem posed by critics, especially the anthropologists, literary critics, political economists, Marxists. So we try to find answer to their queries through such kind of the events. Lastly, again there is the objection. Now, first, critics or the high class people, they looked at culture, culture of the lower class people in a prejudiced manner. And so previously culture meant culture of the high class people. Now we are, the critics say, because of cultural studies, we are going from one pole to another pole, or from one extreme to another extreme. So is it not maintaining the balance? And so that is also the problem. And so we have to, so this hegemony, there was the hegemony of previous approach, and now there may be the hegemony of the new approach. Now, what is right, that we can find in such kind of the event. So this is how, this is a new approach. So we should welcome, discuss, and we have chosen the right persons to guide us, enlighten us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for the concept note. Now I from Mahavidyalaya Shirvat to propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, madam. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
Thanks. Cultural studies very approach, cultural cultures and projects and artifacts jointly organized by Cultural Society, College Center, and English.
I would like to express
To all esteemed delegates for their presence on here. I extend my gratitude to Honorable Chief Guest of this webinar, Principal Dr. P.H. Sadam, for his inaugural remarks. I would like to thank Professor Mrs. Dr. S. L. Lange Madam, Head of the Department of English, Mudoji College, Sultan, for introducing the department and making everyone aware about the past and present of the Department of English and various activities conducted by Department of English. Thank you, Madam. I sincerely thank my friend and convener of ELTA Satara chapter, Dr. Nange, for making everyone aware about the formation and functioning of ELTA Satara chapter. I would like to extend my generous thanks to our friend, philosopher and guide, Dr. A.Y. Singh, for delivering concept notes, and it is as usual power of knowledge for us. Thank you, sir. I would like to thank Subhangi Singh for our very melodious inaugural song. I take this opportunity to thank entire organizing committee and delegates for being present over here. And with this, I thank everyone and I declare the inaugural session is over. Over to Dr. Ganesh Jadhav.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Ganesh Jadhav for the plenary session 1.
Thank you, Dr. Sita Jagtap ma'am. I welcome all the dignitaries and participants in this webinar. First of all, in this first plenary session, I would like to request Dr. Suresh Patil sir, Arts and Commerce College, Nagthane, to introduce the speaker and the chairperson of this session, that is Dr. Debarshi Prasad Nath and Honorable Professor Dr. S.R. Sawant sir. Now may I request Dr. Suresh Patil sir to introduce the speaker and the chairperson of this session. Please.
Thank you, Jadhav sir. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, of course.
Very pleasant afternoon all. I welcome all participants to plenary session first of this national webinar. Today, this task of introducing speaker and chairperson is a great privilege. I feel elated to introduce both of them. I am Suresh Patil, going to introduce speaker and chairperson of this plenary session first. First, I would like to introduce speaker of this session, Dr. Debarshi Prasad Nath. He is presently working as professor, Department of Cultural Studies, Tezpur University, Assam, India. He is carrying more than 20 years of postgraduate teaching experience in universities. He was working as associate professor, Department of English, Rajiv Gandhi University, Arunachal Pradesh. Prominent features of his academic background is his teaching and research outreach are interdisciplinary. His research areas have been spread over translation, culture, films, media, literature, and cultural theory. He has committed to his life as a teacher of cultural studies and aspires to make meaningful and positive contributions to society from this position. His intellectual pursuit has been to find patterns of continuity across cultures and societies to help people connect better while being acutely sensitive to differences. He is presently working on the documentation, preservation, and archiving of rare cultural resources of Northeast India. He is chief coordinator of UGC Center with Potential for Excellence in Particular Areas at Tezpur University. He was granted a faculty enrichment fellowship to the Department of English, University of Toronto in 2009. While talking about his publications, he has published 8 books in which he edited 4 books, translated 3, and authored 1. He has published in reputed journals such as Economic and Political Weekly, Comparative Literature and Culture, Critical Arts, South-North Cultural and Media Studies, and South Asian Journal of Cultural Studies. He has translated many books. He has authored a book titled Jacques Lacan and French Feminists. He was the course coordinator of an online course, e-PG Pathshala, an MHRD initiative on comparative literature and culture as part of a general program on comparative literature. He is presently co-editing a book with academics from the University of Auckland, New Zealand, titled Reflections of Dance Along the Brahmaputra, Celebrating Dance in Northeast India. That is about the speaker of this plenary session. Now I would like to introduce chairperson of this plenary session, Dr. Sunil Sawant sir. His full name is Dr. Sunil Sawant sir. Full name is Dr. Sunil Raghunath Sawant sir. He is presently working as professor and head Department of English, Kisanvir Mahavidyalaya Y. He is member of Academic Council, Shivaji University, Kolhapur. He is president of Satara English Language Teacher Association of India chapter. He had been member of Board of Studies English, Shivaji University, Kolhapur from 2010 to 2015. He translated 3 books from Marathi into English, namely Rajarshi Shahu Chhatrapati, Life and Work, Winds of Sahyadri, and Footprints of Culture. He solely edited book entitled Translation Studies, Theories and Applications. He completed his major research projects with UGC financial assistance. His research papers presented research papers in the international conferences held in Manchester, England, Melbourne, Australia, New Delhi, Hyderabad, Pune, Bangalore, etc. 20 research papers in international journals and ISBN books are to his credit. He has given more than 30 PowerPoint presentations as a resource person in various seminars, conferences, MHRD programs. He has, under his able guideship, 7 students have completed their PhD and 9 students completed their MPhil. Now 6 students are working research under his able guideship. He is the winner of Barrister PG Patil Best Research Paper Award in 2005. Also, he has got Barrister PG Patil Best Teacher Award in 2008 of Shivaji University, Kolhapur. Again, Granth Mitra, Dr. Shivajirao Chauhan Research Award of Sahitya Kala Vikas Pratishthan Satara in 2016. We are fortunate to have these giant figures in the field of literature, language, translation, and cultural studies for this plenary session first. I'm thankful to the organizing committee for giving me an opportunity to introduce these two scholars. Thank you again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Suresh Patil, sir. Now, it's a matter of great pleasure and privilege to request today's resource person and eminent scholar, Dr. Debarshi Prasad Nath, Professor, Department of Cultural Studies, Tejpur University, Assam, to deliver his views on the topic, Understanding Culture from Different Perspectives and Analyzing Cultural Texts and Artifacts from the different domains with the help of different theories. Now may I request Honorable Dr. Debarshi Prasad Nath to express his views. Please, sir.
Namaskar. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you to all my colleagues from Mudoji College, Fulton. And I would like to thank the conveners of the program today, the patrons and the administrators of the college. And, of all of you, I have to thank for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts. And special thanks to the chairperson of the session, Dr. Sunil Sawanji. And thanks are due to the principal of the college and Dr. Savita Mane, who has been in touch with me, Dr. Shinde, who has also just spoken, and he spoke wonderfully well, in his concept note about what cultural studies does and what cultural studies do and what are the challenges for cultural studies. So thank you all. Thank you all for giving me this opportunity, and I hope this will be the beginning of a long-lasting association with all of you. Good afternoon to all of you. Before I begin, I should also say that I'll be sharing some very basic and fundamental thoughts about cultural studies. And these are ideas that I wish to put forth in as uncomplicated a manner as possible so that I can reach out to the maximum audience. And I'm delighted to see that you have invited the best man from the country to talk about this, Professor Pramod Kumar Nair, to talk about cultural studies, and someone I hold in very high esteem, and it's wonderful to see that he is a part of this webinar. Now, the topic or the subject of culture can be looked at from a variety of disciplinary perspectives. And all disciplines have their own very different understandings of what culture is. For instance, the anthropological understanding of the term is quite different from the understanding that we come across in literary criticism. The first thing that I would like to stress upon is that culture, which is the subject of interest and subject of, interest for cultural studies is what people wear, what people hear, what they watch and eat, and what shapes these choices. Why do we do the things that we do? I can go on qualifying the meaning of culture in cultural studies as I proceed with my talk. But this is the first thing that we need to remember, that cultural studies deals with the very ordinary, everyday aspects of culture. So, at the very outset, let us agree about this fundamental difference in perspective between cultural studies and the other disciplines. Culture resides not necessarily only in grand monuments and so-called great literature. Culture is a part of the ordinary and everyday life of people. And we are interested in looking at why things are the way that they are in this everyday life. Now, let me probe this further. There are two meanings of the word culture in common currency, and all of us are familiar with this. In popular discourses, we very often hear the word culture being used broadly in two different senses. First of this is evaluative. And this meaning of culture, it refers to culture as the cultivation of mind, as the cultivation of taste, manners, and culture is thought to be about artistic accomplishments of a group of people or of an individual. This is the sense in which most people use the word culture in their everyday life. For instance, some people are described as being, more cultured than others. We say that, sometimes this implicit comparison is made more explicitly. We say that this group or this individual is more cultured than the other group. This meaning of culture is therefore based on a hierarchical understanding, on a hierarchical system of grading. This system of grading is evolutionary, since it takes culture to be the pinnacle of development. It's taken to be the pinnacle of achievement among a group of people. So culture is what one arrives at after going through the stages of barbarism and savagery. To go back to the Enlightenment, and this was the kind of thinking that was very, very common. This was how culture was thought about. But if you wanted to arrive at culture, which was almost used as a synonym for civilization, you had to go through these stages of barbarism and savagery. And it was expected that every culture in the world would go through these stages to arrive at the final stage of culture. Who possesses culture? Obviously, in this understanding, culture is something that social class, which is typically classified as an elite or ruling class, they possess. So culture is considered to be a classy thing. It's considered to be something that a specific class has. And one is reminded here of the wonderful description that Raymond Williams, one of the founding parents of cultural studies, he gives in keywords. And this is about the members of the working class in England in the 19th century. We use the word culture to refer to the culture of the working classes. It's spelled differently. Culture, C-U-L-C-H-A-H. It is almost like a parody, a mockery of culture. So it was like saying that, okay, we do not have culture. Culture is something that the classy people have. We have culture. And in any case, it is grudgingly accepted slowly with time that the non-elite, which is the group of people which is usually identified as the mass or the people, they also create cultures of their own. Initially, even this wasn't accepted. Sometimes for people to accept the fact that even the masses or the people at large could have something called culture. But this took some time. But even though it was accepted grudgingly, as I say, that they have culture, but it was considered to be something that is inferior. This meaning of relies greatly on the principles of, or the philosophy of aesthetics. Aesthetics, as we understand, is defined as the theory of beauty. And by extension, it was thought to be a matter of cultivated taste. So it is believed that all people do not have this sense of cultivated taste. So this understanding of aesthetics was a very white-centric, Eurocentric, as Dr. Shinde put it, Eurocentric Western perspective. And this first meaning of culture was mainly prevalent in the field of literature. This is where it mainly came from. This is the first meaning of culture. And this, as I said, continues to be very popular. And the second meaning of culture is what we come across in disciplines like anthropology and sociology. This meaning of culture is narrative and descriptive. As against the first meaning, this meaning is not evaluative or judgmental. So in this sense, we refer to the beliefs or the myths, the customs and practices, and the general way of life that is characteristic of a specific population. So anthropologists, historians, folklorists, sociologists, they have had the major influence in shaping our understanding of the narrative content and patterns of culture. So culture in this sense is not about refinement and civilization. Culture in this sense is thought to be something that everyone has. Just give you an example. I'll just quickly cite one of these very popular definitions of culture that we come across in E.B. Tyler, the anthropologist, and he defined culture as the complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, customs, and habits, and any capabilities acquired by man as a member of society. This definition of culture, which is very, very popular, it tells, it gives us a descriptive definition of culture. It is another matter that this knowledge, philosophy and anthropology. Probably it was in the 18th century for the first time that the German philosopher Herder talked about culture in relativist terms. He talked about, the possibility or the necessity, in fact, of looking at cultures from a relativist perspective, not from an Eurocentric or an ethnocentric perspective, or not from a perspective that says that my culture is better than yours, but from a perspective that tries to look at cultures from within instead of imposing beliefs from outside. So that took some time to come. In any case, going back to Tyler's definition, culture is seen to be something that all societies or communities of the world possess. So what we come across these instances are studies of culture. Conventionally, an anthropological study of culture would involve the study of the rites and rituals of communities, their fairs and festivals, their beliefs and practices. And such studies would generally tend to be descriptive accounts of some or the other aspect of the culture of a community, and generally of so-called primitive society. This is a difference that we need to remember of the times. We're talking about a new, form of cultural and social anthropology that has emerged in recent decades. That is probably something that has happened after the emergence of cultural studies. But generally, if you look back at colonial anthropology, you see that a lot of it is very descriptive. And the favorite object study in colonial anthropology was the primitive society or the primitive cultures. So this sense of culture, in some senses, is always oriented towards the past. And the researchers who pursue this understanding of culture are generally interested in the quaint and exotic, practices of communities who live outside the precincts of so-called civilization. Cultural studies generally rejects both these meanings of culture. It partially accepts with qualifications both these meanings, but it does not accept these understandings of culture as they are given. Because cultural studies takes cognizance of the fact that reality itself is always a representation. And it also looks at the wide variety of realities or the wide variety of cultures that are revealed through ethnography and other forms of qualitative research. So there's an acceptance of cultural relativism in the sense that there's an understanding that all forms of culture are equally valid. Now, going back to the two meanings of the word culture, I would like to clarify a few things here. Cultural studies, as I said, has generally rejected the first evaluative meaning of culture. I think more or less all of us understand this. In so far as the second meaning of culture is concerned, there's a subtle difference that we need to understand. The discipline of cultural studies accepts the role of power and knowledge in influencing culture. This is the big difference between the approach towards culture in anthropology and the approach towards culture that has evolved in cultural studies. So it is never about culture in itself that interests cultural studies. It is never culture in itself that interests cultural studies, but it is always about the relationship of culture with something else. So it is never about culture in abstract, but culture as it relates to life, different aspects of life. So, like Dr. Shinde said, culture is a reflection of the operations of power. This is why we make a distinction between cultural studies and studies of culture. And this difference is conceptually very, very important for us to understand. Cultural studies makes use of studies of culture, but studies of culture is not enough for cultural studies. I mean, you need that. You need the study of culture to work with as your data, right? And to develop your own arguments about it and to show how there is a relationship of, power with the dominant structures of a given time. But that is not enough. You have to move beyond that. You have to engage theoretically with what data you gather from these kind of descriptive studies. This difference is very, very important. So the important questions for a practitioner of cultural studies are, firstly, what is the relationship between culture and power in this society? How does this culture or this cultural practice resist or consolidate power? So think about any cultural practice or think about any cultural text. I'll be citing a few examples in the course of my lecture. I hope that makes sense. That helps us to connect better with what I'm trying to say. Suppose we are talking about a Hindi film song. Now, from a cultural studies point of view, our focus will always be on what ideology the song, we in fact will not be bothered at, but we might be more interested in how the song resists or consolidates or strengthens prevailing gender hierarchies or other forms of ideologies. Now, if we want to tell the story of cultural studies from the very beginning, I think we need to say a bit more about the first meaning of culture, because strangely, I believe that this story is connected to the other one. Those who perceived a relation between culture and civilization, those that is who accepted the evaluative meaning of culture. These are people like Matthew Arnold, for instance, who felt threatened by the development of popular culture. So ironically, the first people who focused serious attention on the concept of culture were people who were actually cynical about the growth of mass culture. At this point of time, of course, there was still no conceptual difference between mass culture and popular culture. And this conceptual mapping or this conceptual difference was marked later, whereby popular culture acquired a more positive connotation and mass culture came to be seen as something that is negative, something that is imposed from above, imposed by the market on people. Whereas popular culture, later on in cultural studies, came to be seen as something that emerges organically out of a people. So this difference between popular culture and mass culture, as I said, I mean, this difference was not there in Arnold's time. So Arnold was very scared about the growth of mass culture. And if you go back to the 19th century, Matthew Arnold, in his book Culture and Anarchy, he warned of the possible consequences of the spread of what he called, the Philistine culture, which was rapidly growing with the extension of literacy and democracy in the 19th century. And class divisions were rigid enough to confine political and economic power to one class at one point of time, but industrialization and the gradual growth of the middle class and the expansion of the market, the coming of mass production, these were starting to alter the boundaries. And the artistic unproductiveness of the culture of the new masses, that is something that worried people like Arnold and others like him, who felt that such culture would generate a kind of literature that would be shaped purely by economic interest or by the whims of the market. So the rise of the market scared writers and poets. And to some extent, of course, their concern was justified. In fact, to a great extent, I would say that their concern was justified. They could sense that the rise of the market could lead to a gradual trivialization, gradual dilution of all aspects of culture, including the arts. And interestingly, one is reminded here again of Raymond Williams, who has dealt with the impact of the commodification of art in culture and society. And this analysis that he did in culture and society, please read the chapter called The Romantic Artist, if you haven't already, where he gives a wonderful cultural studies interpretation of how to connect what was happening in culture with the socio-economic context of the time. Now, if you go back to the Romantic period, you realize that that was a time when there were a lot of changes that were happening in society. The market was rising. As I said, this is the growth of, this is the period of the growth of industrialization. This is the period of growth for the market. And writers felt threatened by these changes. Writers of the period felt threatened, and they threatened and they were scared about the fact that their success or their merit would now be judged on the basis of their popularity in the market. From being given very exalted positions in society, they were suddenly reduced to a status where they were called upon to sell their stuff, to sell their wares in the market, like people would sell shoes and stockings. What could have been more humiliating than this? From being treated as seers, as demigods, they were suddenly reduced to a position where they had to depend on their popularity amongst the new hostile middle class who were waiting to pounce upon them, literally, but who lacked knowledge, and lacked the reading that the patrons had. So remember that the system of patronage was in operation in those days. In the Romantic period, the system of patronage was in operation. So in those times, before the rise of the this new form of the market, and before mass production of books started, writers used to thrive under the system of patronage. The system of patronage obviously had its own limitation, but it also had its strength. Say, for instance, the writer had an immediate relationship with his readers. Under this system of patronage, the writer got his feedback immediately from his patron. The moment a writer would write a poem, he would rush to his patron with the poem in his hand. The patron, who would be a very well-informed, very knowledgeable man or woman, and most of the time, unfortunately, he would give his feedback on this. Right? He would give his feedback on the poem that is written, and so that was a wonderful thing. That part of it was really wonderful. That there was an immediacy of relationship between the writer and his readers. Now, that immediacy of relationship between the writer and his readers was broken by the rise of the market. So what we have here is Raymond Williams providing us a brilliant analysis of things of changes in the world of art, changes in the world of culture, by relating it to the changes that are happening in the socio-economic context of the times. So many people were skeptical initially of the rise of the mass culture, and there were people like Matthew Arnold and Alfred Lewis and T.S. Eliot, and you're all familiar with these names, and we are all aware of the fact that we were opposed to the rise of mass culture. But it's also important that we take cognizance of the fact these people also contributed to the rise of a new attitude and a new perspective towards culture. As I said, I wanted to begin the story of cultural studies from the beginning, and that's where I have to accept the fact that people like Arnold, Lewis, and Eliot, they realized the political potential of culture. They understood that there is a very close relationship between culture and society, And they felt that the decline in society, or the qualitative decline in society that we witnessed, was a result of the decline that had come about in the field of culture. So they related one to the other. Similarly, another important idea that I believe cultural studies has taken from these people, these three particularly, Matthew Arnold, T.S. Eliot, and Alfred Lewis. They believe that culture could be used as a weapon for political change. So, when they do this, or when they say this, there is obviously a difference in their understanding of culture from these practitioners of cultural studies. But definitely, they did highlight the political potential of culture. I think that is a very important point. And so the point is that these people, they brought serious academic attention to mass culture. And Lewis, in fact, even wrote about advertisements. I think that was one of the first serious studies of advertisements that Alfred Lewis undertook. It has to be accepted that their views were elitist, and they reflect the thoughts of the dominant class of the times. Now, we are talking about this development in the Western context, because that is where historically cultural studies started. I mean, it started in England, right? We are all familiar with this information. I didn't want to share much information with you. I wanted to give my interpretation of how things have worked out for cultural studies. So it was in the Birmingham University where it all started, in the Contemporary Center for Cultural Studies at the University of Birmingham. And it started only after educational opportunities became more inclusive in Britain. And as adult education spread, there was a change in the class origins of those people who came to universities and colleges. The university system, the higher education system in Europe was not very inclusive at all. I mean, till the first part of the 50s and the 60s of the last century. And if you look at it, if you come to think of it, you find that many of the major figures in the post-Lewis phase of cultural criticism in Britain, they came from a working class background. And they came from that sphere of culture, which was generally classified until then under the very undignified category, or the very undignified rubric of working class. And this new generation of scholars, they brought in their own understanding of culture, which gradually shaped the discipline of cultural studies. So what do these pioneers, these pioneers want cultural studies? To put it very simply, they thought that cultural studies would look at the commonplace situations of everyday life and look at the reasons, behind things being the way that they are. Cultural studies could look at those aspects of our lives that exercise such a powerful influence on our existence that we take them for granted. In fact, one of the things that we are very suspicious of in cultural studies is the kind of knowledge that is considered to be common sense. Common sense is something to be really scared of in cultural studies, because nothing is common sense actually. What becomes common sense through socialization very often is a reflection of dominant ideologies. So the process of our acceptance of particular subject positions that confer a sense of identity on us, whether that be as individuals or as members of a particular class, race, or gender, or as citizens of a country, this is a cultural process, and it works because it seems natural and commonsensical. And I think one of the most important objectives, not just of cultural studies, but of social sciences in general, is to ensure that we do not naturalize what is culturally constructed. I remember, Jack Derrida saying this in an interview once, fascinating interview. It's available on YouTube. Those of you who are interested can watch this. Jack Derrida, the very well-known French philosopher of post-structuralism, he talked about this fact that one of the main objectives of the social sciences should be to prevent the naturalization of what appears to be natural but actually is culturally constructed. So this is what cultural studies also tries to do in its own way. It's an interdisciplinary method, of course, that contextualizes representations and practices within the social and political relations of emergence and function. So it's not just satisfied with that. It interrogates the structures of domination in a society, right? It interrogates a society's structures of domination. It is more concerned with the experiences of, as you can understand, the marginalized and the underprivileged section of society. For instance, the experiences of the working classes or of the elites, women, the tribes, all of these are important sites of investigation. Now, where does the theoretical tradition of cultural studies come from? It comes mainly from European, critical Marxism that developed in the 20th century, and was a more revisionist, phase of Marxism, which accepted the fact that Marxism also needed to change with the changing time. And it is an attempt made by many thinkers, including the Frankfurt School of Thinkers, to understand how capitalist societies work and how to change them. Now, today, in this age of postmodernism that we're living in this age of what is referred to as anything goesism, it is easy to characterize any study related to culture as cultural studies. But we need to understand that the question of intent is very important in cultural studies. Richard Johnson pointed to this when he said that it is important to recognize the inadequacy of studies of popular culture that occur for purely academic purposes. There cannot be studies that are purely academic, or when people study popular cultural forms without any consideration of how it reflects our relations. Popular culture is a site of investigation, yes, but it should be done with an intent, with the intent of examining how the construction of everyday life, the realities of everyday life happen, and how are the most common everyday aspects of our life normalized by popular culture. That is the question that cultural studies is interested in. Because the reason we do this is because we do not believe in research that is purely academic. We believe that research is always political, and it always has the duty to examine the power relations that constitute this form of everyday life so that we can do something to change it. Now, in cultural studies means that you accept that there is something wrong with the world, there is injustice in the world, there is inequality in the world, and we must do something to address that inequality, to address that injustice, and address it academically, of course. But the question of intent is very, very important. Hello, Dr. Sawant, how much time do I have, if I may ask?
You may continue for 5 or 10 more minutes, no problem.
Okay, thank you. Now, the traditional borders of a text is challenged by cultural studies. It looks at the politics of actual production. Those of you who are most of you, it seems, are from English literature background, and you'd be aware of this movement in the early part of the 20th century called New Criticism, which talked about the fact that there's no life beyond the text. All that you needed to know was there in the text. The text is sufficient for understanding any kind of meaning or interpreting the text itself. You do not have to get outside the text to explain anything. But the understanding of text that we have in cultural studies is exactly the opposite of it. The traditional borders of the text has been widened greatly by cultural studies, and we also believe that it's important to connect one text to the other text, to see every individual text as reflecting a network of relationships. So cultural studies thus thrives on the idea of intertextuality, the kind of intertextuality that Julia Kristeva talks about. She believed that a text is not an autonomous entity. Instead, every text exists on the basis of its relationship with other texts. When I subject a speech, say for instance, of a politician to a close scrutiny in the field of cultural studies, I will be looking at not just the immediate text, but located in the context of speeches made by other politicians. I might also look at the way in which the figure of the Indian public is represented in such speeches. Finally, leaving out the many other options, I might also locate the text in the socio-historical context of the time. After all, words do not convey the same meaning, in changing circumstances. Words keep on changing their meaning. And the texts that are generally of immense importance for study are the ones that are classified as instances of popular culture. Now, with 4 people that we generally talk about when we talk about the origin of cultural studies: Richard Hoggart, E.P. Thompson, the historian, Stuart Hall, and Raymond Williams. And all of these are very important names. And unfortunately, we do not have a lot of time. I wanted to, there's a lot more that I had to share, but I think I'll have to stop in another 5 or 10 minutes. So let me quickly talk, about the fact that all of these 4 founding parents of cultural studies, they were adult educators, and they were university professors, and they all came from that strata of society which was generally, they were new to, in universities. Their class was new in the universities, in the university system, and their experience in the adult education system, working in the adult education system, enabled them an access, provided them an access to a section of society to which otherwise they would have remained disconnected. I mean, there was no way in which university professors would be able to understand how subcultures work or how the smaller minorities think. That kind of a thing would have been impossible if these people had not been connected to real life, really lived life of people, the experiences of real people. I mean, that is to be collected from their experience of dealing with these people firsthand, not learned from books. That is another thing that's very important for cultural studies. The experiences, being experienced in reality that you were talking about. And all these 4 people, I mean, whether you talk about P. Thompson's The Making of the English Working Class, or you talk about Richard Hoggart or Stuart Hall, you find that all of them, brought in this insight into their analysis of culture and cultural artifacts. Now, I had said earlier that cultural studies is distinct and different from studies of culture. Another reason, apart from what I've already said, is that cultural studies is not value neutral. Cultural studies is a discipline with a political intent, in the sense that we believe that, as I said, there is exploitation, there is injustice in the world, and we have to address that injustice. No, we have to address that injustice by talking about it, by making value judgment about it, by saying that, okay, this is right, and this is not good, this is acceptable, and this is not acceptable. Now, if you get into that postmodern kind of a situation where you accept that all kinds of truths are valid, and you get into a really difficult scenario where you would be unable to differentiate between right and wrong. And that is a situation which we wouldn't like to get into in cultural studies. Now, quickly, because I was asked to talk about the ways in which cultural studies is drawn from different theories and what it is learned from different theories, I'd just like to say a few things before I the question of ideology, of course, is very, very important for cultural studies. And one of the thinkers who greatly influenced the early practitioners of cultural studies was Louis Althusser, the French structuralist Marxist, who used the Lacanian model of psychoanalysis to interpret society and to interpret culture. And he had very interesting things to say about how capitalist societies, they create willing workers for the capitalist system. As I said, I mean, one of the things that Marxists of the 20th century tried to talk about or try to address is, why is it that in spite of the fact that people are talking about exploitation, no one really ever protested against what was happening? One reason why protest did not happen in the way that people were expecting was because of ideological indoctrination. Ideology works in powerful ways, and ideology invites, interpellates, Althusser says, it calls upon us to occupy certain subject positions in society. It calls us and says, okay, you come and sit here, you take up this subject position that has been given to you as a male member of society, or as a female member of society, you take up this subject position. If you don't accept that subject position, you will be thrown behind bars, or you will be thrown to an asylum. And that's where Foucault comes in. Foucault was, of course, the student of Althusser. Interestingly, initially, Althusser was a great attraction for the early practitioners of cultural studies, but gradually, there seemed to be a focus, a shift of focus from Althusser to Gramsci, the Italian thinker, because Gramsci's model of hegemony seemed to be more accommodative and more inclusive in many ways of the idea of human agency, right? Like Althusser's models made it seem as if everyone in society would be internalized and socialized, and we would go on producing more and more of the same kind forever and forever. It's a very pessimistic model. At one point of time, people moved away from that model and they adopted the Gramscian model of analysis, which talked about a hegemony, which talked about the manufacturing of consent, and talked about how human beings always retain sufficient agency to question what was being imposed on them. So just because things are given, things are being thrown on a particular society, doesn't mean that they're going to accept it. And out of these ideas, you can see Stuart Hall developing his own model of encoding and decoding. This encoding, decoding model is something that I wanted to discuss in detail. Unfortunately, there's no time for that. But let me quickly end by saying that for Stuart Hall, who did this wonderful study on audience reception, he said that contrary to popular assumption, those times in the first part of the 20th century, like the 50s, the 60s even, people do not accept always the messages that are being given to them through media. They interpret messages in their own unique ways. This is where the question of human agency, the question of human freedom comes in. We are free to interpret. We retain enough freedom to interpret text the way that we want. It's not as if someone can just impose meanings on us from without, and we just accept. People are not just passive recipients of meaning. We actively create meaning as well. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'd like to stop with this, and I would like to interact with you if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Honorable Dr. Debashri Prasad Nath, sir, who unfolded the different dimensions of culture with the references of Stuart Hall, Raymond Williams, and many other writers. So now, if the participants have any doubts or queries, please, the session is open for discussion. Please you can ask your questions or doubts, please. Okay, fine. I think there are no questions from the participant side. So now may I request the chairperson of this session, Honorable Dr. Sunil Sawant, sir, President, Satara Chapter ELTA, Professor and Head, Department of English, Kishanvir Mahavidyalaya Vai, Satara, for his presidential remarks. Please, Honorable Dr. Sunil Sawant, sir.
Good afternoon to all. Professor Dr. Debarshi Prasad Nath, Professor Dr. Pramod Nair, Principal, Dr. Kadam sir, my friend, Dr. A.Y. Shinde, former head, Department of English of Mudoji College, Fulton, the current head of Department of English, my student, Dr. Sarita Mani, Dr. Sanjay Dikshit, co-convener, Dr. Sita Jagtap, co-convener, Dr. Nandu Kari, convener of Satara ELTA chapter, Dr. Shardul Thakur, the chairman of the next session, and there are so many other dignitaries amongst us and friends. Let me express my sense of gratitude to the organizers of this national webinar for giving me this wonderful opportunity to chair this session. And it was indeed a very wonderful session. Of course, Dr. Debarshi Prasad Nath had no sufficient time to elaborate his ideas, but in whatever time he took for discussion, he covered almost all important dimensions of cultural studies. And the important thing which he began with was the difference between studies of culture and cultural studies. And he introduced two important meanings of culture. One was evaluative kind of meaning, and later on narrative and descriptive kind of meaning. And after elaborating about the traditional ideas about culture, he shifted to cultural studies, and he appropriately drew our attention to the operations of power that are at work in cultural studies and in the society. And he also drew attention to very important aspect of cultural studies, that is the aspect of resistance and the aspect of subversion. And he also took a brief survey about the origin of cultural studies, the way it began in England and spread to other centers, other departments in different universities. And he referred to the concept intertextuality proposed by Julia Kristeva and social historical context as well. And finally, he came down to Althusser and Gramsci, especially how instead of Althusser, scholars have prepared the model proposed by Gramsci because it is more accommodative, he said. To add something as a chairman, for a long time, we teachers of English language and literature, our approach was more or less Anglo-American, I will say, something because, of course, the British ruled us and they handed over us certain forms of literature and certain ways of studying literature. But in the 20th century, we accepted certain models that were evolved in America, especially new criticism. And we used to consider literature as an autonomous kind of thing. And we used to concentrate only on structural kind of aspects of literature. Especially, we used to study novels in terms of plot, character, and point of view. The aspects which are as if there in the text itself, part of literary context. And when we studied poetry, we used to concentrate on imagery and other dimensions of literature. But with the change around 1950s and 1960s, with the fall of British Empire and with the departure of the British from different colonies, the empire started writing back. And the emergence of post-colonial literatures and post-colonial contexts, we find the relevance of cultural studies, because instead of accepting the hegemony of the English or American models, we started resisting, challenging the models imposed upon us by the erstwhile colonial powers. And around this time, 1960s, we find different movements emerged. Civil rights, the movement of the civil rights, the movement of women emancipation, and the way, for example, we started a certain way, for example, American applicants, they started identities. The Panther movement in America and later on in India. All these important social movements made us revisit the idea of autonomy of art, of literature. And we shifted from what is called literary studies to cultural studies. And we started discussing literature instead of as an autonomous whole in the context of power structures and power relations. And I must congratulate today's resource person for introducing to the teachers who have joined. Okay, more than 100 teachers have joined on Zoom, and there might be others on the YouTube platform for providing this wonderful feast and introducing some key concepts from cultural studies. So whatever emerging scholars which we have in our university and from other universities, if they are interested in taking certain topics from cultural studies, definitely these lectures, okay, Dr. Debarshi Prasad Nath's lecture and later on Dr. Pramod Naik's lectures, they are going to become what I would like to call points of departure for our scholars. So I must once again congratulate Dr. Debarshi Prasad Nath for sharing his views about cultural studies. And I must also thank the organizers and the audience. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sunil Sawant sir, for your presidential remarks. There is one question for Honorable Speaker of this session. Cultural studies concentrates on ordinary life. It can be called privilegization. Is it degeneration of aesthetic values?
Yeah, can I come in?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Debarshi Prasad Nath, sir. Please, sir.
That's a very important and a very interesting question and a very difficult question for someone who for whom cultural studies is bread and butter. It's a very difficult question that you've thrown at me, and I couldn't exactly get that word though. Privilegization. I don't know what what is being meant there, but yeah, there is always the danger of the degeneration of aesthetic values, because aesthetics has never been a concern in cultural studies. At least not, since the time that institutionalized cultural studies started, as I said. I mean, that in some ways, of course, one could argue possibly that it has led to the development of what is called cringe culture these days. Because there's an absolute disconnect with aesthetic concepts. Yeah, that's an important issue. That's true. I mean, it's happening. There is a degeneration of aesthetic values, definitely. But it need not have happened only because cultural studies is talking about ordinary life. I don't think the problem is there, though. Is there anything else? Trivialization, I think that's what is being meant here. Yeah, there is definitely a banalization of culture. There is a banalization of culture. There's no doubt about that. Like, but that danger was always there when we were opening up. I mean, like, there's no sense of place. There's no sense of aesthetics involved in any kind of application of culture. To like, you go to a shopping mall and you hear Western classical music playing in the background. I mean, what kind of a situation are we talking about today? That's a common this thing, is it? So there is a certain banalization of culture, but that's an old argument also in many ways. I mean, people have talked about it even earlier, long time back. And even Marcuse talked about it, the banalization of culture. Harvard Marcuse talked about it in One Dimensional Man. And but at the same time, there was also reason to be optimistic about the growth of technology, about the spread of culture, about democratization of culture, in the manner in which Walter Benjamin talked about it, for instance, in his famous essay, the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction. So yes, there are reasons to be optimistic about, there are reasons to be slightly concerned and pessimistic. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your fine explanation of the query raised by the participant. Now, may I ask Dr. Mrs. Swati Patil, Assistant Professor, Venitai Chavan College, Karad, District Satara, to propose the vote of thanks of this session. Mrs. Swati Patil, Assistant Professor,
Yes,
Venitai Chavan College, Karad.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Yes, sir. Okay. Good afternoon to one and all. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose vote of thanks of this first plenary session of one-day national webinar on cultural studies, jointly organized by the Department of English, Mudhoji College, Fulton, and English Language Teachers Association, Satara chapter. First of all, I express sincere gratitude to Dr. Debashri Prasad Nath, Professor, Department of Cultural Studies, Tejpur University, Assam, for his insightful views and deliberations on the topic Understanding Culture from Different Perspectives. Sir has explained in detail the definition of culture along with history of cultural studies and how to analyze text with the help of different cultural theories. Thank you, sir, for such an informative speech. I extend the same sincere feeling of gratitude to Professor Dr. S.R. Sawant, sir, President ELTA Satara chapter and Head Department of English, Kishanveer College, Y, for gracing the chair of this session. It has been always nice and knowledgeable experience to listen to you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Sawant, sir, for your valuable and thoughtful chairperson's remarks. On the behalf of the Mudhoji College, Department of English, Mudhoji College, Fulton, and ELTA Satara chapter, I would like to thank all the participants from various states of India for their patient listening and cooperative participation. I thank Dr. Suresh Patil for introducing the speaker and chairperson to us. I extend my gratitude to Dr. Ganesh Jadhav, moderator of this session. At last, a big thank to the organizing team, the Department of English, Mudhoji College, Fulton, Dr. Dikshit sir, Dr. Mane ma'am, Dr. Jagtap ma'am, and convener ELTA Satara chapter, Dr. Kale sir, for successful organization of this webinar. Thank you to all. With the permission of the chair, I declare that the first plenary session of this national webinar on cultural studies has come to an end. Over to you, Dr. Jagtap ma'am. Thank you to all. Dr. Jagtap ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. At the very outset, I welcome the resource person, Dr. Pramod Nair, Professor, Department of English, University of Hyderabad, and the chairperson of this session, Dr. Shardul Thakur, for plenary session 2. And all those who are present among us virtually for the national seminar. I request Dr. B.S. Lokde sir, Associate Professor and Head, Department of English, D.P. Bhosle College, Koregaon, for the introduction of the speaker and the chairperson.
Thank you, Jagtap ma'am. Good evening to all of you, honorable dignitaries, special guests of honor, eminent researchers and scholars, creative writers, faculty, and other participants from different states of India and abroad. I am Dr. Bhagwan Lokde, Associate Professor and Head at Department of English, D.P. Bhosle College, Koregaon. On behalf of Mudoji College, Fulton, and ELTA Chapter Satara, I welcome you all into this virtual gathering on the occasion of a national webinar on cultural studies, a new approach to explore cultures, cultural texts, and artifacts, organized by Department of English, Mudoji College, Fulton, in collaboration with English Language Teachers Association of India, Satara chapter. First of all, at the outset, I thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to introduce the special guest of honor, honorable resource person of this session, and the chairperson of this session. First of all, I take this opportunity to introduce the resource person of this session, an eminent scholar of international repute, a researcher, and a versatile creative writer, Professor Pramod K. Nair sir. Professor Pramod K. Nair sir is a senior professor at Department of English, School of Humanities, University of Hyderabad, and he has been working there as a professor since 2001. As far as his broad areas of expertise is concerned, he takes an interest in language and linguistics, and especially Indian writing in English. Talking about his publications, whatever I could gather information from net sources, sir has published 48 articles in national and international journals. He has published 24 reviews and has written and published 12 books, as well as he co-authored in 49 books and articles. He also has published 4 editorials, and to his credit, he has 292 citations for his research papers. And as far as his H index is concerned, that number is 8. And his research works are also having some of the cross references, and those citations are 138. As a writer, I have to mention some of the books he has written and published. It's my pleasure rather to take some of the titles of his books: A Short History of English Literature, An Introduction to Cultural Studies, Essays in Celebrity Culture, Styles and Styles, The Human Rights graphic novel, Drawing It Just Right, Indian Travel Writing in the Age of Empire from 1830 to 1940. He has edited 4 volumes of the book, Colonial Education and India from 1781 to 1945, and Eco-Precarity, Vulnerable Lives in Literature and Culture, and other books are also to his credit. From his net profile, I could take one good definition of time. I could read it, and especially for the sake of participants, I repeat here, I read out whatever he has written, that he says, I teach English and courses in cultural studies. Virile worker whose idea of a good time is to write. Sir, your sentence that the idea of a good time is to write will definitely give inspiration for other researchers, for other creative writers too. With this brief introduction, I switch on to introduce and I welcome Professor Pramod Nair into this plenary session second, and I switch over to introduce the second person, that is chairperson of this session, Dr. Shardul Thakur sir. Dr. Shardul Thakur is an associate professor in the Department of English at Chintamanrao College of Commerce, Sangli from Maharashtra. Previously, he taught English at Ferguson College, Pune for almost 17 years. He did his MPhil from the Department of English, University of Pune, and has a doctorate from the English and Foreign Languages University, that is IFLU, Hyderabad, India. And the topic of his PhD dissertation was Identity, Radicalization and Reform in Islam, an analysis of select personal contemporary narratives. Apart from his teaching literature, his areas of interest in the field of language and literature are literary criticism, political theory, cultural affairs and international relations, interdisciplinary studies, Indian writing in English and translation, Dalit writing, translation studies, English language teaching, and the use of technology in teaching. So dear participants, we have such two scholarly persons here, and especially Honorable resource person, Professor Pramod Nair, to introduce us and guide us and enlighten us on the topic cultural studies as an interdisciplinary subject which can be explored with different theories. I welcome the resource person, Professor Pramod Nair, as well as the chairperson, Dr. Shardul Thakur, into this session, and stop with these few words. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It is a part of great luck to have such an outstanding personality, esteemed scholar, Dr. Pramod Nair, Professor, Department of English, University of Hyderabad, as a resource person for this session. To avail this great opportunity, I request Dr. Pramod Nair to deliver his views on the topic cultural studies as an interdisciplinary subject which can be explored with different theories. Please, sir.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, right. Thank you to all of you for that invitation and introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, especially after getting the fag end of Debashi's talk. I got the last few minutes. Good to see you, Debashi, as well. Could you please mute everybody else? I'm getting a lot of crosstalk. Hello? Right. As I was saying, it's good to be here after Debashi's talk. I got the last few minutes of his conversation, and I'm also suitably impressed at the number of participants for this webinar from this particular college. So it's a wonderful initiative that you're able to pull so many people into this particular set of sessions. I'm sure Debashi has done a fair amount of introduction to the frames within which culture studies operates, the standard operating procedures for analysis. So what I have to say might at some point repeat what he has said. Hopefully not, but I suspect it will. But in any case, there are certain things which one cannot avoid talking about when one talks about cultural studies. And let's begin with some basic assumptions and basic arguments. And this is partially driven by the question that was posed to Debashi about whether it's a trivialization or privileging of the ordinary. The answer Debashi already gave, and I would like to build on that in a few words, actually. One, it is not a trivialization. On the contrary, what it does is, and this is the foundational assumption for cultural studies work, for a very long time, we have assumed the word culture within quotes as associated with a certain class of people. So those who perform at the Lalit Kala Academy, those who perform at the National Center for Performing Arts, those who have their artwork displayed at the major art galleries, we have only considered these as culture. What cultural studies does is to argue a case that the work, cultural practices, cultural production of the non-elite is also culture. That popular forms, which includes street art, graffiti, and things like that, is also culture. So it is not a trivialization as much as a shift in aesthetic focus, which argues that the aesthetics of the everyday, the aesthetics of the routine, the aesthetics of the mundane are also worth talking about. So what cultural studies does is to shift the focus away from the thus far elite class-based definitions of culture, the aesthetic standards set by those particular class forms, and instead move it towards things that we see routinely, things that we come across routinely, but we ignore because it is not deemed to be art or not deemed to be aesthetic enough, and which we then reject by saying, oh, this is hardly art. Or we might say, this is vulgar, or this is common, or this is just plain ugly. Some of you may be aware of the graffiti artist Banksy, B-A-N-K-S-Y, who does a lot of street art in and around Europe, specifically England, and sometimes in the United States. And Banksy is a pseudonym. We have never been able to unpack his identity. But what he does is he does reworkings of classical European paintings like Vermeer and others, and puts it up on walls. Would you think of this as trivialization? What Banksy does is to make sure that we question what we mean by aesthetic principles. We question what we mean by standards of value and taste. That is at the heart of culture studies. The assumption, the argument, and the foundational directive that we focus on the work produced, the cultural practices produced by the non-elite members, and which Raymond Williams would define in his wonderful phrase, culture is ordinary, he said. Culture is ordinary. It's the everyday life of the masses of people. So cultural studies takes the aesthetics of the everyday, the aesthetics of the routine and the aesthetics of the mundane, and examines it. That's the first key point. The second one is, why and when we talk about the aesthetics of the upper classes, of the elite, we think of them as only being about beauty. Whether it is English poetry or the paintings of Thomas Gainsborough or John Constable, M.F. Hossain, or any of those. But what cultural studies does is to emphasize that within these cultural practices, within these aesthetics, there is a subtext which captures the power relations of a social order. That is, aesthetics is a way of disguising actual economic, political, and social power relations. This could be about gender, this could be about class, this could be about caste, doesn't matter. So what is important is to recognize that for cultural studies, aesthetics is a means of getting to the power relations that structure social orders. And cultural practices are a manifestation of these inequalities, injustices, and power relations. What do we mean by this? Aesthetics, by appealing to our sense of beauty, often disguises what constitutes actual everyday practices, whether it is between genders, between classes, between castes, between races. So the linkage of culture with power is the second key element in cultural studies approach to the everyday. Now, when we say linkage of culture with power, what do we understand by it? When we speak about, say, national identity, when we speak about subjectivity, when we speak about aesthetic standards, we are glossing over the fundamental, basic conditions in which these are produced. So when we speak about, say, cultural national identity, we ignore that several people may not feel included in a nation. That when we speak about national identity is a more or less hegemonic, totalitarian approach to and definitions of who belongs and who doesn't belong. National identity may be inclusive for some, but not inclusive for everybody. And this is glossed over when we speak about slogans and movies and jingoistic nationalist films, where we speak about India, Indianness, national belonging, etc. For example, India's linguistic chauvinism, India's regional chauvinisms have a very long history. But do we see films made about them? When we speak about nationalist films, are those films also paying attention to questions of regional disparities? I'm talking popular films. I'm not talking about art films or the multiplex cinema, which has a different focus. I'm speaking of the potboiler, the masala film. In these, do we see references to regional disputes over, say, the sharing of river waters? Do we have films which talk about the refugee problems? Debarshi comes from a place where he encounters this on a routine basis. But do mass-produced films tackle this? Do these films talk about caste? They talk about gender, yes. They talk in kind of sideways look at sexuality and sexual preferences. But do they talk about regional disparities, the regional tensions that constitute interstate relations in India? And you can take any river dispute. It can be the Kaveri, which is, of course, always a hotbed for inter-regional disputes. And when you think about, when you think in terms of those kinds of disputes, do we have films that are talking about these when we speak about the nation? In short, are the aesthetics of popular blockbuster cinema attuned to regional, social inequalities and disputes? The answer is a clear no. Popular film does not seek to. That is the point I was trying to make. When we say culture and power, culture conceals, it hides power relations and social inequalities. And as a result, for culture studies, it becomes more and more important to address questions as to what kind of aesthetics mask the social realities between people, languages, religions, regions, etc. So we have the Desh Bhakti kind of nationalist or jingoistic films, all of which talk about the glory within quotes of India and urge you to have nationalist feelings. But have we asked whether everybody has the same kind of nationalist feeling? Have we asked whether everybody feels included in the nation state, which is India? Or is the nation state, is the nationalist ideology itself in favor of or prefers a certain kind of region, language, religion, and subsequent identities? That is the question. The question is whether the aesthetics of the big firms address existing social cracks, fractures, or does it subsume all of them under the broad category nation? So cultural studies is interested in the ways through which cultural practices encode and disguise social and power relations, or power relations in the social order is a more accurate way of thinking about it. That's the important part. I already mentioned the everyday as central to this, but I want to make one further point. When we say that culture is ordinary and the culture studies is interested in the routine and the everyday and the mundane, it also talks about systems of value, what the cultural studies scholar John Froh refers to as regimes of value, through which certain categories of cultural practices are excluded. That is, it's important to recognize that what counts as beauty, what is acceptable as beauty, is not in the object itself. It is an attribute. It is ascribed. What do we mean by this? I have a pen in the pocket. Okay. Is this pen beautiful? I'll hold it up, show it to you. Is this pen beautiful? Some of you will say, well, it looks a nice pen. Somebody might say it's too thick. How can one use a pen which is this heavy and thick? It's not a very handleable pen. Now the question is this pen by itself beautiful? What I want to get you to understand is, by itself, an object doesn't have beauty. Beauty is attributed to it through a set of cultural practices, where you will say, this kind of pen is beautiful. Somebody else might say, a slimmer pen is more beautiful. What are we getting at here? What we are getting at here is, beauty and ugliness are not inherent features of an object. I'm going to drink a glass of water. Is this glass beautiful? Several of you will say, what is there to ask? I mean, who talks about a glass as beautiful? Who discusses the aesthetic appeal of a glass? That's the point. The aesthetic appeal of a glass is not automatic. It's attributed. For cultural studies, the ascription and attribution of meaning, of value, of beauty is an index of the power struggle. What constitutes the beauty of a watch, of a pen, of a glass of water is not innate in it. It's not innate in it. It is the result of a series of negotiations. It is the result of a series of power struggles, which then concretize in certain ways. So meaning, beauty, value are the result of a series of negotiations. It is the result of a series of power relations through which certain items become more valuable, certain become less valuable. Cultural studies is interested in the process of meaning making. Let me give you another example. I have a, now, you're all faculty and students, and you're discussing books and what is good reading. And a neighbor or somebody walking by comes and tells you, I will give you an excellent material to read. And he comes and gives you the Hindu. Gives it to you and says, read it. It's excellent reading. And you say, why should I read this? It's a newspaper. What does he mean? It's a wonderful piece of writing, that it's great reading, it's intellectually stimulating. And you say, come on, that fellow said, rubbish. Then you go into your class or your office room, and your head of department or your principal or your teacher says, I'm going to suggest something very important for you to read. And you say, here. Also gives you a newspaper. And then you say, the principal suggested it, the head suggested it, the senior professor suggested it, Pramod Nair suggested it. It must be important. It must be good. Now you see, this by itself as a text has no value. Who recommended it gives it value. When the Dukanwala, the Kirana store man recommends the Hindu, you will sit and look at him and say, my God, now this fellow is giving me reading material. Why should I take it seriously? But when Pramod Nair says, you must read this, you'll say, oh, Pramod Nair has recommended, there must be something important. This by itself has no value. Value comes to it because of the context in which somebody is recommending it. The context through which it comes to you. It comes to you because somebody says, this is good. Beauty, like in the case of the pen, the value, like in the case of the newspaper, is not an automatic condition of the object. It is an attribute that comes to the object through what John Froh will call regimes of value. Meaning, truth, beauty, value are all the result of a very complex series of cultural and cultural negotiations. Culture studies is interested in the making of meaning, the making of value. I'll give you one more example. We all recognize our national flag. I am assuming there's no dispute over it. Why is this design preferred? I mean, why was this particular design and color combination selected? Most of us don't know. Most of us don't know. Most of us don't care. We have a national flag. That much we know. The point is, this design was chosen over other designs by some process. What was that process? How was the negotiation undertaken as to this design was given and that design was given, this was rejected, this was accepted, third one was modified, etc. In short, it's important to recognize that the final design, the final meaning of the national flag was arrived at through a series of very complex negotiations, which involved the designer, the then government of India, the prime minister intervened, etc., etc., etc. By the time this particular design was fixed, by the time this particular combination was fixed, that power relation, the negotiations had been finished. In short, what I am trying to communicate to you is, please do not think meaning is automatic. Meaning has to be arrived at through a complex process of negotiation, which is why my example of the newspaper. When the ordinary person recommends a newspaper, you don't take it seriously. But when I sit here in a Zoom meeting organized by your principal and your head of department says, this is a very important piece of reading, automatically that object attains a certain value, its value goes up. Does it really deserve that value? Who knows? But oh, Pramod Nair said it. It's very important. Why? Because he said it. No, Pramod Nair, for all practical purposes, might be playing a joke. Or he might just be a fool. But he holds it up very carefully and he puts it very seriously and he says, This is an important piece of reading. I suppose all of you have been to museums. How do you know which object is valuable in a museum? It will have a frame, it will have a red string saying do not touch, there will be a little label, etc. Has anybody here also seen fire extinguishers in a museum? They are also installed on walls, right? Did you think the fire extinguisher is part of the exhibition? Is part of the museum? No, why? Because the fire extinguisher up on the wall, here, the wall, does not have a thread around it, doesn't have a ribbon, doesn't have a frame, nothing. But the pot, glass, sword, dress, whatever it is, has been structured, stylized in a certain way, placed in a certain way. The semiotics of the museum, the arrangement of the objects in the museum bestow value upon those objects. What do I mean by this? The objects on the museum wall with a little ribbon around it, highly stylized, with a little description, makes you understand that that object you are looking at is valuable, is important. Now, think about it. In many museums, the objects might be a broken pot, and somebody has written there. A classic piece of pottery from Mohenjo-daro or Harappa. What is that piece of pottery? It's a broken cup. Now, you please tell me, why is that broken cup important? As in, can you drink in it? No. Can you sell it? No. Can you put it up in your house? No. Then why is it valuable? Because the museum says it is valuable. You can see cultural studies in operation. The museum has the power to bestow value upon an object. The museum, its archaeologists, its anthropologists assign value to those objects, which then, after it has been given value, that value, suddenly becomes a matter of honor, of visibility, of price for people to come and say, go and look at it. Wow, look at that. Somebody will ask you, why is that important? Because it's a cup from Mohenjo-daro. Oh, really? Can I drink chai in it? They say, what are you talking about? It's a cup which is broken and it's from Mohenjo-daro. And you might say, if I can't drink chai in that broken cup, what is that value? Why should it be important? Then the person will get very annoyed with you usually and say, don't talk rubbish. It's very important because it's from Mohenjo-daro. It's from Mohenjo-daro, but he still can't drink chai. That fellow will get very angry with you and say, you have no sense of aesthetics, you don't appreciate history, etc., and he will scold you. What we are looking at here is the bestowing of a value called heritage, the bestowing of a value called tradition. And the other person is talking about the value of functionality. Can I use this cup to drink chai? No. Then what are you supposed to do with it? You should look at it and admire and think of all our history, all our traditions, all our heritage in it. Yeah, that is what you are saying. But me, I'm not interested in the historical significance of a pot. I am interested in the functional significance of a cup. No. You cannot do that. Aesthetically, this is more important. Culturally, it is more important. That is the point. The museum has the power to bestow meaning upon a piece of broken pottery. If that broken cup were in your house, you would throw it because it's of no use. But in a museum, you start admiring it. You pay to watch it. You go there and stand there and say, wow, what a wonderful piece of broken cup. Why do you say that? You say that because the museum holds within itself the power to assign value of different kinds, aesthetic, heritage, cultural, social, symbolic values to that particular pot or cup or whatever. But for us, for me, I just want a cup to drink chai. I just want a glass of water. I can't use that cup. And the museum fellow will be very annoyed if I say, what is the use? Like I said, do you look at the fire extinguisher as an art object? No, you say, no, that is not an art object. Why? Because nobody put it in the place to give it value. They put it there for function. That is what cultural studies does. Cultural studies is interested in the production of meaning and the consumption of that meaning. Now, what do you mean by consumption? So far, I've spoken about production. Now let us spend some time talking about the consumption of meaning. How does any meaning become assimilated into our everyday life, into our routine, into our ways of thinking? Meaning is a constant series of negotiation, as I've already said, and it is not automatic. It is not automatically assimilated. For cultural studies, the way meaning circulates and is accepted is as important as the way it is produced. Hence, a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of theorizing is spent on the consumption and the audience reception of meaning. And this is broadly called the circuit of culture. The circuit of culture is the production, circulation, consumption aspect of culture. The circuit, C-I-R-C-U-I-T, of culture is the process through which meaning is produced, circulated, and consumed. And here we'll spend a little time in the circulation part and the meaning production part, of which we have already done some. Okay. What is important to understand is somebody produces a film, somebody produces a sports event, somebody produces a museum object, which is all very well. But how does it come to you? As in, how does it reach the user, the audience? Before it comes to you, before it reaches the audience, there is one stage, which is my fourth or fifth, I think it's my fifth point, I forget now, sorry. Audience was my fourth point, yes. Before the object comes to you, before the product comes to you, it is mediated through a certain set of processes. There are advertising agencies, for example, that tell you about that product before you see the product. They are called cultural intermediaries. Cultural intermediaries. Cultural intermediaries are modes through which certain service sectors, such as advertising or publicity agents, sell a certain product or a person. Pen, right? So you look at it and you say, oh, pen. What does it do? A pen writes. A pen writes. Right. Now, I will tell you, this is a very unique kind of pen. So you ask me, what's unique about a pen? A pen just to write. I tell you, no, this belongs to this kind of brand. This brand is 200 years old. Now, if you say it's 200 years old, automatically its value goes up. As you know, they'll advertise Coca-Cola since so-and-so year, Levi's jeans since 1850, all your fast food centers, your Haldirams, they all have a date since. Why? Because the longevity of a business, of a brand, is being sold to you as a marker of its quality. It has been here for 55 years, 60 years, 150 years. It is valuable because it has survived so many years. So I will tell you, this pen is manufactured by a company which is 200 years old. What have I just done? I have used the rhetoric, the discourse of longevity, of time, to tell you that this pen, this particular pen, is a very important pen. And you will say, how does it matter? It's 200 years old. I said, no, but you see, because it has been here for so long, they are the best. They are the best. Why should it be the best? So I'll say, you see, Baba, if it has been here for 250 years, That means more people have trusted this manufacturer, this particular pen manufacturer. And they say, ah, yes, that is true. Now, please go, when you finish this webinar, go and look at how many companies advertise their date of origin. Levi's since 1860, etc., etc. Why? Because that gives a certain value. It shows a certain trustworthiness. I say, this pen, it's a very good quality pen because people have trusted it for 250 years. Say, no, that's important because people trust the brand. I have functioned as a cultural intermediary in the process of manufacturing a certain trustworthiness around the product, around the idea of trust. A cultural intermediary doesn't sell you the pen. It sells you a value. What is that value? Trust. A cultural intermediary tells you that this is desirable. This is valuable. This is trustworthy. Oh, this pen. Please go take a look at Rolex watches or Schaefer pens or Waterman pens or whatever. So I can also sell it to you in a different way. I can tell you, I like this pen. So you'll ask me, yeah, so no, I like this pen because it's nice and heavy and I like the way it writes. So you also go buy a pen like this. Then I'll tell you, by the way, this costs, I'll write a random number, 4,000 rupees. And you will say, what nonsense. Why will I give you 4,000? Why will I pay 4,000 rupees for a pen? So you see, when I told you the basic function that this is a pen that writes well, you are not willing to pay 4,000 rupees for it, right? I tell you, go buy this pen. It writes very well. And it only costs 4,000 rupees. And you say, what rubbish are you talking? Are you mad? Why will I pay 4,000 rupees for a pen which is doing what any other pen does? Then I tell you, that's what you think. But you see, this pen is manufactured by a company which is 250 years old. So that is why it is important to pay that kind of money. And you say, oh, so it is a trustworthy pen. I say, yes, it's a trustworthy pen. So you should buy it. You see what I have done? I have shifted the meaning from the function of a pen. I can open this and show you. See, it's a pen. It writes. I can write it and show you. But will you pay 4,000 rupees for it? It writes like any other. All pens write. All pens write. But you won't pay 4,000 rupees because you'll say that 25 rupee pen will also, I can buy a Reynolds which will write like that. I can buy a 50 rupee pen from Parker which will write. Why should I pay 4,000 rupees? So you see, I gave one meaning to the pen. This is a pen that writes. That is the meaning of this pen. But for that meaning, you're not willing to pay 4,000 rupees. Then I tell you, this pen comes from a company which is 250 years old and therefore it can be trusted. For that, you will pay 4,000 rupees. You understand what I've done? I have removed the first meaning, which is the functionality of a pen, and replaced it with another meaning, the trustworthiness of the pen, because the company is 250 years old, for which you are willing to pay the money. For which you will say, sorry, I got it a little entangled. For which you will say, oh, it's worth it. After all, it's a 250-year-old company. Please note, what is important is to recognize that the nature of meaning, the nature of value has shifted. I have shifted it away from the function of a routine instrument to the heritage value of that instrument, the trustworthiness of that particular instrument, and then said, that's why you are paying. Like my earlier example, a broken pot in your house has no value. Suppose a visitor comes and you serve chai in a cup which is chipped. They will feel insulted, your family will shout at you, you yourself will feel upset. But that same cup in a museum, you will go and say, wow, wonderful thing, the Mohenjo-daro people had such wonderful cups. Arey, how is that? Same cup. Because the semiotics of the museum bestows a certain meaning. So the context of the meaning production mediated by cultural intermediaries can move the meaning from one value system to another. It can move it from function, routine use, to something else, to something more. That is the important thing. It's important to recognize that value is not automatic. Value comes through a certain process. That process is what I'm interested in. So cultural intermediaries are service sectors like the public relations officers, like the publicity managers, who make sure you understand a certain value. I'll give you one more example about how cultural intermediaries work. In the last 1 year or more of the pandemic, have you seen the number of advertisements for cleaning solutions and soap? Everywhere there are. All of them will focus on why you need to protect your family using this particular soap or that particular Lysol or whatever it might be. They're selling you soap. Why should the family be a part of the discussion? What they are telling you is, it is your duty to protect your family. It is your responsibility to protect your family. And therefore, you have to buy this particular soap or that particular cleaning solution or whatever it might be. That is, they are selling you the product, but they are also selling you the value system, which says it is your job to protect your family. They're not just selling you a product. They're selling you the necessity, the value, the tradition of being responsible for your family's health and safety. Now you understand. What is important to recognize here is these examples that I have given you, pens and cups and all that, are not frivolous. Cultural studies is interested in the production of value systems. So when you are being sold, say, insurance, or you are being sold soap, you're not being sold the soap as a product. You're being sold soap as part of a much larger system of values. So you say, oh, I have to protect my family. True, yes. What do I do about it? Somebody can say, oh, buy the soap. But why this particular soap? Because it gives 99% protection. As any chemist will tell you, there is no soap that offers 99% protection against the world's bacteria. So it's not enough to say that. Then it will add, it gives 99.9% protection. And so your entire family is safe. You're not really interested in the 99.9. You're interested in the fact that your entire family will be safe. That is important. How a company has recommended, propagated, pushed a value system is more important than the product which it is selling. So when you buy the value system, you buy the product, not the other way around. Not the other way around. You first accept, oh yes, it is my job to protect the family. It is my necessity to protect the family. Therefore, in order to protect the family, I should buy insurance, I should buy Lysol, I should buy Dettol, etc., etc., etc. They're not selling you the product. They're selling you a value. They're selling you the value that it is your intractable, unshakable belief that the family must be protected. This is about power, isn't it? But are you able to see power? No. Power is unobtrusive. Power is not the lathi charge by the policeman alone. That is also power. Once your head is broken, you know it. There has been a lot of power in the stick. I'm not disputing that. I'm not disputing any of the physical acts of violence. But power also operates in unobtrusive, hidden, insidious ways. So when the idea and the ideal of the family is being sold to you, when the myth, the fantasy of the 100% protected family is being sold to you, then accompanying that is the system of meanings, which is what cultural studies is interested in. Cultural studies is interested in the production of meaning. And that takes us back to the opening, and I can stop here so we have some time for discussion. It's interested in the production of meaning, but it's also interested in how the meaning gets delivered, how it is mediated, because meaning doesn't come raw. Meaning is not pulp. Meaning has to be sanitized, securitized, modified in particular ways. Only then it becomes meaning. And that process is undertaken by cultural intermediaries. It is important to recognize that the production of meaning and the consumption of meaning are not automatic. They are a series of negotiations, a series of processes through which power operates. Because you see, like I give you the example of the pen, if I tell you for this pen pay 4,000 rupees, you'll laugh at me. But when I tell you other things related to it, you won't laugh at me, you'll take me seriously. The whole point is that, when we initiate a value system, when we put in place a value system, we are enabling the generation of meaning. We are enabling the production of meaning. But in the process, we are also making the audience aware that what they are paying for is not the product, but a value system. And cultural studies looks at this as the process of negotiation, which conceals many, many layers of power relations. I'm going to stop here, so we'll have a few minutes for discussion and any queries that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. You have scholarly and intellectually illustrated the topic. We, all of us, cherished your literary eloquence and the acumen in your analysis of aesthetics. Sir, there are a few questions I would like to ask. The first one is, how do you look at mall, big bazaar as a cultural text?
The what? How do you look at what?
Mall, or a
the
big
mall.
bazaar.
Okay. Yeah, right. Okay. Well, what I would say is, the mall is primarily the street taken in. We used to go to shops, isolated shops, one-off shops, but now you go through a series of shops. It is like walking through a street, except that it is protected. So the first thing you recognize about the mall is the fact that it is the street taken in, as in the street has been securitized and sanitized. So that is point number one. Point number two, may I request that people who are not speaking to kindly mute their mics. I'm getting a lot of, okay. All right, okay. Yes, so what is important is to recognize that the when the street is taken in, it's a relatively safe space rather than a common space. It has been mapped. There are cameras everywhere. They are monitoring you. They're sanitizing everything. So the mall is taken in. Now, there are different varieties of malls. Malls which are luxury malls and malls which are middle-class malls. Think of luxury malls. These are malls where the brands will not have a price tag attached, because what is being sold to you is not the product, but the value of possessing something so luxurious, the prestige of possessing something so luxurious. Prestige cannot be quantified. You cannot have a price tag on prestige. So what is being told to you is the product, this particular thing, is invaluable. No question of asking the price, because you should be able to afford it anyway. And if you recognize the brand, you'll not ask the price. So what is being sold to you is the idea of prestige, of privilege. In a middle class mall, the exact opposite is being told. In the middle class mall, what is being given to you, what is being told to you is value for money. It doesn't say this is a luxury item, this is not for you, this is this, that, another. No, what is being given to you is the idea that whatever you are paying for is value for money. It appeals to a sentiment, an ideology, a construction of meaning where whatever you pay for must be something that works for you. So it is not the aesthetic prestige or privilege of owning an object. It is the functionality of owning an object. There is one other point I would like to make about malls. I'm sure you have recognized that malls have a lot of glass-fronted windows. Why? Malls have a lot of glass-fronted windows because every time you look at this particular glass, you can see the bookshelf here, right? Yeah, it's a glass. But if there is another glass facing this, you will see more of the same, right? What a mall does is to multiply the objects which are there, like infinite regression, so that your desire also adds up. You are walking through a series of desirable objects. Unlike in a shop where you go and you say, I want this, this, and this. Then you say, this I want, this I don't want, this, this, this. But in a mall, even as you look at one set of objects, you're also looking at other sets of objects. Window shopping is the cultivation of desire and the cultivation of desirability. So all the shopfront windows are views of another world. That is what the malls do. Okay. Next, please.
Thank you, sir. Another question is, do you think gender, particularly women, are made target by the companies by giving aesthetic value to the products?
Well, yes, they are targeted, but not only by aesthetic value. They are also sold an idea where the woman is in charge of the budget. So therefore, she has to be very careful as to how much she's spending. So the value for money is an ideology being marketed, keeping the woman in mind, because she is supposed to control the budget of the house and match the income with the budget. So the ideology is, one, the woman takes care of everything. Two, she must take care of everything. There's a big difference. She can, but she must. And that second one is important because then you say, no, you see, this is more value for money. What is being done? The woman is being targeted, yes, but the woman is being targeted as an instance of having a particular kind of virtue, that she's careful with money. She doesn't spend like casually. She is worried about whether whatever she's buying is usable or not, etc. So what is being sold is not the product. It is a feminine virtue that is being sold.
Thank you, sir. One more and last question. What is the meaning of meaning? How do we reach its meaning? Meaning may mean different to others. How to resolve it?
I suppose that is a kind of a doggerel verse being used to make fun. Thank you. Good. I like that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm getting a lot of crosstalk. Somebody please, will somebody please moderate? Whoever is talking, I am not able to decipher. Please.
All participants are requested to mute their mics.
Please give your questions to the chair or the moderator so that they can communicate it to me. I'm getting a lot of background noise, so I'm not able to decipher the question.
Should be sent in the chat box, please. Those who want the sentence.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, you are now.
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know how to put it, but whole of your discussion centers around attribution of meaning to the artifacts and different things that we study under the head of cultural studies. Slightly a kind of parallel to Saussurean theory of sign, where signifier and signifieds. I would call it a modern approach to cultural studies. But the other approach that you have presented throughout your session is, in a way, studying culture is studying power. If we put it like this, to a large extent, aren't we missing many integral aspects of cultural studies? I mean, you definitely spoke about values, but apart from values, there are many other things. I mean, when I study something from history, maybe an artifact that is found in Mohenjo-daro, there, experience of someone is attached to it, use of someone is attached to it, value of someone is also attached to it. But everything cannot be brought under the broad head of power. Do you really think so?
Good question. But my counter to that would be, how do you know it was valuable to somebody? How do you know that this was important to somebody and it encodes certain values? It is because somebody has been telling you this. Yes. I am not disputing anything that you're saying. I am only alerting you to the fact that your awareness of the historical value of an object, the sentimental value of an object is mediated. That mediation encodes a certain power structure. So, for example, when the museum tells you this is a historically valuable artifact, you take it seriously. But when your sibling gives that same to you, you laugh and say, that is not valuable, you're talking rubbish, you don't make fun of me. That is what I'm referring to as power. I'm not disputing anything. I am what you're saying. I'm proposing to you that the negotiation of meaning, historical, emotional, sentimental, financial, is always through certain structures. Those structures are what I'm calling power. But let me qualify, since you brought it up. Power also operates at the level of affect or emotion. For example, parent-children relationships are not understood solely in the sense of power that I'm using, right? You get what I'm saying? They're also negotiated through empathy, trust, affection, which are also power structures. They're also power structures, but their focus is slightly different. So that is why I gave you the example of the newspaper, that when I recommend a newspaper and when somebody who's obviously of a different class recommends a newspaper, you give it a different value, ascribe a different value. That process is what cultural studies is interested in. So it is not disputing what you said. It is qualifying what you said by saying these encode structures of power, processes of power. Thank you, but good question.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to request Chairperson Dr. Shardul Thakur, Professor and Head, Department of English, Chintamanrao College of Commerce, Sangli, for his presidential remarks.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
So, it's a pleasure to share virtual space with an eminent scholar like Professor Pramod Nair. So we saw how he started and in a sense took the discussion ahead from where Professor Nath had left it, the question of trivialization, right? And the way Professor Nair described it, cultural studies is all about breaking the hierarchy, the high versus popular kind of culture, right? And the shifting of the focus away from the elite class-based framework, right, which is used to analyze art. He gave us this wonderful example of Banksy, who this artist who reworks classical Western art pieces, right? And how from here we talked about the power structure, right? And how cultural studies engages with all of these issues, questions like class, gender, community, etc. Right? And how there's an intricate link between culture and power. And I must say that Professor Nair has also made some very important points about the questions of national identity, right? So the totalitarian or hegemonic form of identity, and how that way of looking at things kind of is not really very inclusive, right? So there's a certain power structure that is in operation here. He took up this example of mainstream Bollywood cinema, and how very often a lot of, not just Bollywood, many other film industries, right? They conveniently gloss over issues of regional disparity, caste, chauvinism, and many other things. Right? So this is also similar to what Foucault would call practices of exclusion, right? What is included and what is not. And using very simple, very basic kind of examples, Professor Nair explained how the very notion of beauty is not an absolute kind of a thing. It's not something that is inherent. It is something that is ascribed from the outside, right? And using the simple example of a newspaper, depending on who recommends it to us, that is what decides what the value of that product is, right? And drawing upon a wide range of domains like marketing, where cultural intermediaries also play a very important role, right? Things like a diamond is forever. So Professor Nair explained how marketing companies are selling not just the product. In a sense, they're selling a certain notion of value to you, right? Your idea of being the homemaker, taking care of everything that concerns the family. So in a sense, I would say that today's session was a very wonderful session where Professor Nair has given us a comprehensive overview of how cultural studies actually works, right? And with the help of very simple, very basic kind of examples, which I'm sure when the common person, the lay person, students as well as research scholars, all of them would be able to make sense of the dynamics of cultural studies, the way it works. So thank you, Professor Nair. Over to you, Jagtap ma'am.
Request Professor Nilesh Pase to propose vote of thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Is my voice clear to you, ma'am?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Honorable dignitaries and all participants, on behalf of the Department of English, Mudhoji College, Fulton, and ELTA Satara chapter, I extend my regards and gratitude to Honorable Speaker of this session, Dr. Pramod Nair, for his knowledgeable, thought-provoking, enlightening, and enriching speech on cultural studies as an interdisciplinary subject which can be explored with different theories. It really made us think. Dr. Pramod Nair rightly explored and put forward varied theories of cultural studies. Surely, these theories will definitely be useful and helpful for the study of different cultures. Let me now, put forward before you some key takeaways from his speech. Number one, cultural study takes the aesthetics of the mundane. Number two, beauty and values
are the result of power relations and cultural negotiations. Number 3, value to anything comes by the suggestion of someone or a recommendation by someone. Number 4, window shopping is the cultivation of desire. He also talked about the aesthetic values and functional aspects or importance of different things. In short, we will say that to study culture is to study power, is the essence of his speech. So thank you very much, sir, for your wonderful address. And his speech was really very nice and outstanding, I may say, because the comments that different participants has put in the chat box is the very proof of it. Thank you, Nair sir. Thank you very much. I also express my deep sense of appreciation and thanks to Honorable Chairperson of the session, Dr. Shardul Thakur sir, for Shardul Thakur sir for chairing the session and expressing his remarks on the speech. My sincere thanks also go to Dr. S.C. Jagtap ma'am for nicely moderating the plenary session number 2. I'm also thankful to Dr. B.S. Lokde sir for introducing the session. I'm also thankful to Dr. Dikshit sir, Dr. Mane ma'am, Dr. Jagtap ma'am. And last but surely not the least, I thank all the participants from different colleges for listening the speech attentively and asking your own queries and questions. Thank you one and all. Over to Jagtap ma'am.
Thank you, sir. And over to Dr. Jadhav, sir, for the further session of valediction.
Thank you, Dr. Jagtap ma'am. Now, I would like to invite all the dignitaries and the participants to the last session of this webinar. After the intellectual feast, we are in the valedictory function, and here we have in special appearance Principal Dr. P.H. Kadam sir, Principal, Mudoji College, Fulton. The chairperson of this session, Honorable Dr. A.Y. Shinde sir, former head, Department of English, Mudoji College, Fulton, District Satara. In this particular valedictory session, I would like to invite the representative feedbacks of 2 participants. May I ask Dr. S. Fatima Saeed, Assistant Professor, Waqf Board College, Madurai, Tamil Nadu, for her valuable feedback. Dr. S. Fatima Saeed, Madurai, Tamil Nadu.
Thank you, sir. I will read words. Beauty is truth and truth is beauty. There is something I want to say. That Dabasri Prasad Nath gives different dimensions of cultural studies, and no words to praise Pramod Nayan sir. He gives what he says is beautiful. Why I say is what he says, all the things are truthful. That's the thing. I will end with an anecdote that is from You Can Win. You Can Win, that a boy comes to a balloon man and asks that whether the black balloon goes up. And then the balloon man says it is not the color outside, it is the air inside. That Sivkera says it is the attitude. Similarly, culture studies, it appraises beauty to something, but the real thing is some other thing. So thank you one and all for giving me this beautiful opportunity. Thank you.
Now may I request Mrs. Joshua Vincent, Assistant Professor, Andaman College, Port Blair, to give her valuable feedback. Mrs. Vincent, ma'am, please. Ma'am, are you there? Mrs. Josephat Vincent. Okay, fine. Is there any participant who wanted to spontaneously give his... Yes, you are there. Okay, ma'am. Please give your valuable feedback. Hello? Hello? Huh? Is there any participant who spontaneously wanted to share his feedback? Okay, fine. Now may I request Honorable Dr. H.G. Dikshit sir, IQAC Coordinator, Associate Professor, Department of English, Mudoji College, Fulton, District Satara, to propose his vote of thanks.
Hello. Hello.
It was indeed a great intellectual feast to all of us to attend this national webinar on the recent and very interesting academic area called cultural studies. The deliberations that took place here proved very useful to teachers and students alike. On behalf of the organizers, that is Mudoji College Fulton, Department of English, and ELTA Satara chapter, I extend sincere thanks to both the resource person, Honorable Dr. Debarshi Prasad Nath, Professor, Tejpur University, Assam, and Honorable Dr. Pramod Nair from a very reputed academic institute, University of Hyderabad. All of us know that both of them are stalwarts in Indian literary and critical fields. We are lucky to have them in this academic event only because of the online mode of delivery. Thank you, sir, for your gracious presence and the deliberations. I am also thankful to the chairpersons of both the plenary sessions, respectively Professor Dr. Sunil Sawant from Kisanveer Mahavidyalaya, Y, the founder president of ELTA Satara chapter, and Professor Dr. Shardul Thakur, who is presently working at Chintamanrao Commerce of College, Sangli. Thank you, sir, for being the chairpersons for both the plenary sessions. I am also grateful to Professor Dr. Bhambar, the BOS chairman of English Shivaji University, Kolhapur, Dr. M.A. Sheikh, the former principal, DG College Satara, who has been participating this academic event. I am also grateful to Dr. Trupti Karikatti, the head Department of English, Shivaji University, Kolhapur, and all her colleagues who constantly render academic support to our department. I am also grateful to Principal Dr. J. Mehtre and my friend Professor Dr. R.L. Jirange for being present in this academic session. I sincerely thank the office bearers of Satara ELTA chapter, especially Dr. Sawant and Dr. Kale, for providing every kind of collaborative organization for this event. It is my humble duty to extend thanks to my teacher and academic mentor, Dr. A.Y. Shinde, for his multidimensional role in organization of this webinar. His relentless passion for knowledge and purely academic interests are the blessings in true sense. I thank my friends, Professor Rajendra Tambile from Shirwar College, Dr. Suresh Patil from Nagthane College, Mrs. Swati Patil from Vinutai Chavan College, Karad, Dr. B.S. Lokade from Koregaon College, and Professor Nitin Phase from Umrej College, who nicely introduced the guests as well as expressed a vote of thanks in that particular session. Sincere thanks are also due to my friends, the moderators, Professor Dr. Ganesh Jadhav from DG College Satara, and my colleague, Dr. Mrs. Sita Jagtap. With their lucid, apt, and interesting sides of moderation, they knitted a beautiful web of thoughts and exchange of ideas in this webinar. Now I must thank the honorable office bearers of Fulton Education Society and our in charge principal, Dr. P.H. Kadam, for giving us encouragement, academic liberty, and every kind of support to make this event fruitful. I thank the faculty members, the staff members, and the students of my college for rendering every kind of help in this academic event. I thank my colleagues, Professor Joshna Borate, Professor Laila V. Sheikh, and Sri Ganesh Jadhav, the technician, for making available this technical platform to us. No doubt, I must extend sincere thanks to all the participants across different states of India for registering and actually participating till the end in this the webinar. It is unbelievable to get such a large number of participants. I thank you wholeheartedly. Lastly, I must thank Dr. Mrs. Sarita Mane, the head of my department, and all my colleagues for giving this opportunity to me. And with the permission of the chair, I declare that the national webinar organized by Mudhoji College Fulton in association with ELTA Satara chapter is over. There is a request that certificates to first 100 members will be released today, and if there are any more, they will be released tomorrow. Please fill in the feedback form. Thank you once again for your participation. The conference is over. Thank you.
This